We are going to call this meeting to order now. It is 6:37 on August 10, 2023, and this is a public meeting of the City of Portland Police Accountability Commission. If the Spanish language interpreter, Liz and Carolina, can please give the information on the Spanish language interpretation.
Esta junta es una junta pública sujeta a las leyes estatales de Oregon y las reglas administrativas de la ciudad de Portland y será grabada. Habrá interpretación disponible al español. Para poder escuchar en español, por favor, oprime el icono del globo, luego interpretación y seleccione español. Continuará viendo la junta para escuchar al intérprete. Por favor, denos un minuto en lo que se habilita esta función.
Muchas gracias. The city also offers ASL interpretation, which is being provided by Maria and Kevin. Please pin their video feed to see their interpretation throughout the meeting. The closed captioning is turned on in Zoom as another means of assistance. But please note that this is an automatic captioning services and is not always accurate. The city supports access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to a public meeting notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov to ask for other access assistance, including interpretation into other languages. This meeting is a public meeting subject to the City of Portland Administrative Code and Oregon state law and is being recorded. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commission members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to ask questions using Zoom Q&A feature. As the commissioners are presenting and or discussing things, if attendees have questions, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A. We hope to use this feature to help guide our conversation during the meeting and future meetings agenda topics. We'd like to be clear that not all questions will be answered in the meeting, but if answered, both the question and answer will be visible to you and will become part of the meeting record. To access this feature, just click on the Q&A icon in the middle of your screen. Now I will pass it to Co-Chair Dan for the land acknowledgement.
Thank you. My name is Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I'm one of the three co-chairs of this final phase of our work. And every time I read this land acknowledgement, I say this is the one the city uses, but it's not as strong as I would do if I were writing my own. So we acknowledge that the rivers, lakes, streams, and lands of the lower Willamette River rest upon the occupied territories of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Calumet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes. We recognize the many villages, traditions, cultures, and relationships that existed along the river since time immemorial. We recognize these tribes stewarded these lands and rivers since time immemorial for future generations. We recognize and undertake responsibility for the destruction of the river and land, of traditional food sources, sacred places, and multifaceted ways of life. We acknowledge the economic and social values that enabled the harm to the river, including systemic racism, classism, and other systems of oppression that perpetuated harm against Black, Indigenous, and immigrant communities along the river. With this acknowledgement, we commit to honoring and learning from the past, working towards a more equitable and sustainable future for the lower Willamette River. We commit to seeking solutions that acknowledge the inequities of past socioeconomic policies and the harm done to people and our relationship to these lands and waters.
Thank you, Chair Dan. Now our next item is the community agreements. There are 3 pages. Please read, and I will ask the final questions. Okay, let me ask everyone, do we all commit to following the community agreements for today's meeting and gently calling our colleagues and collaborators if needed? Can you see your hands? Thank you. Now I will pass it to Co-Chair Sima to talk about our timeline.
Greetings, everybody. Yes, going over the timeline as you guys are looking on your screen right here presented to you. The Police Accountability Commission is split its work into 6 phases, which is we're now in the concluding phase of our work, the 6th phase, which focuses on taking everything that was done in previous phases and converting it into proposed changes to city code and the settlement agreement, and approving those for council consideration along with a report. The commission will work until the end of next month, or this month, I should say. Time flies. The end of the month, which is August 31st, in a couple weeks. And we will present the proposals to the city council for their consideration and approval after it finishes meeting. On to the next slide. Yeah, so the outcome documents the commission is creating in this phase include proposed changes to the city code, final reports of the Police Accountability Commission, which could include explanations and rationales for the legal text, recommendations for the board's bylaws or bureau's policies, recommended changes to the settlement agreement, and recommendations to other levels of government, such as the city council. And in this slide, as you see, this slide is the project plan for the concluding phase of the Police Accountability Commission's work. This slide is for members of the public to be able to understand how the commission gets from now through the end of the phase. The blue boxes right down the middle are public meetings, and the pink boxes below them are consultations with the Police Accountability Commission's attorneys. Today's meeting falls into the blue boxes with the purple border located in the center of your screen right there. And moving to the next slide. Following today, here's the upcoming meetings of the Police Accountability Commission that we would like to highlight. Next Monday, August 7th, there is an that's passed. So as you see, coming up on Saturday, we have a community information session. It's hybrid and Zoom, and you can, if you were to come, please come, and it'll be at the Lentz Commons. Following that, we have a public hearing and a public meeting on August 14th. So the public hearing, 6:30 to 8:30, and our public meeting 8:30 to 9 p.m. on Zoom. And moving on. And in review of today's meeting's purpose, we're reviewing several documents that might be useful in revising previous decisions and documents, like the areas of agreement documents. These documents include final checklists of tasks, community input tracker, discussion group reports, equity reviews, and values and goals, and staff suggestions based off of gaps or contradictions, or technical edits, which we have a lot of. They'll include reports back from members who volunteered to report back on some of these documents as well. Following that, today, there'll be the first discussion on the draft code recommendations of the commission. This is one of 2 items the commission has finalized before concluding its work. And earlier this week, a public draft was posted to the commission's website. So today we begin discussing those things. And then at the end later today, we'll also have general public comment and welcome the public's input into our work. We will no longer be doing garden plot as of this point, as I've been told in our earlier meeting, we're now harvesting and no longer planting.
Thank you, Co-Chair Sima. Now, our next item on the agenda, it is about community engagement. We are now going to hear updates from staff Austin about community engagement. I will pass it to you.
Thank you, Victoria. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Let's see here. We've got a lot going on. We are doing 9 events in 19 days. We have 4 events behind us. We got 5 in front of us. If y'all can open up that link I put in the chat at the beginning of the meeting and sign up to go to some of them. We've got a lot of awesome people engaged right now. I went out today with Lionel Irving with Love is Stronger and Jennifer Harnett with 4 Forces, are 2 of our consultants right now that we're using for community engagement. And I went out and flyered around the Lentz neighborhood with the youth, and that was super awesome to go be with them and spend time with them. So that is for our event that's going to be on this Saturday. I think we have 4 commissioners signed up to be there. It's also hybrid, so if you want to join on Zoom and you can't make it, that's fine. We will have pastries and coffee from a local coffee shop, Refuge Coffee, over there. So come on out if you can make it. And that is just one of 5 things that you could possibly attend in the next 10 days or 12 days. So we've got one on the 12th, and then we've got just for y'all, we'll be doing a private Zoom event with IPAC, the Interfaith Collaborative Group. That just got added to the calendar yesterday. So I'm just telling you about it now. That's going to be on Thursday, the 17th from 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. That's just going to be for the PAC and for IPAC, closed to the public. And so we'll be doing kind of what we've been doing, similar, presenting what you all have put together. So it'd be great to get some of you there. Commissioner Yume, thank you. Commissioner Yume signed up for all 5 of the events coming up in the next 12 days. So would love to get anyone else on board, and Commissioner Charlie and CMOB as well have been going to a lot of those. So thank you. And then after that, we've got a youth and families event that's going to be at Mekong Bistro, which is on Northeast Siskiyou and 82nd. We're expected to have about 100 to 150 youth and families there. Mike Myers, the director from the Community Safety Division, is going to be there, as well as the Deputy Director Elizabeth, myself, Samir. So it would be great to get as many of you there as possible, out there meeting the youth and their families, and just showing them that that y'all are like volunteers, and I think there's maybe some separation between the youth just not really knowing who's running this commission. So if you can get there, it's going to be a Friday evening from 4 to 6 p.m. and we're going to have salad rolls and spring rolls and chicken wings. So we're going to feed everybody. So coming out, that event is also going to be hybrid if you can't make it in person. And then on top of that, we are doing a Spanish speaking business owners event. This is going to be private to business owner communities in the Spanish speaking community. And that's going to be at Bar Cala. That one's not going to be hybrid. You'd have to be there in person. I believe most of the people attending also speak English, but the presentation, Victoria, it will be helping Juane do that in Spanish. And that's going to be on the 19th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. So check that out as well. And then our final community engagement event will be on Tuesday, the 22nd. We were going to do it at Mill Park Plaza 122 because there's been a lot of engagement there and we already had a lot of people excited about it, but it is not ADA friendly. So we're going to be switching locations, and I will let you know when we have a location locked down for that event. So yeah, that's it. We've got an event next Thursday, next Friday, and next Saturday, and then the following Tuesday. And of course, this upcoming one on Saturday. So if you can make it to any of those, that would be much appreciated. If you can't join us in person, 4 out of 5 of those events are going to be on Zoom as well. So this is it, home stretch, guys. I know you've put in a lot of time and work. So really appreciate each and every one of you. And then let's see here. Anything else? Anybody who's
Sorry to interrupt you, but Commissioner Faith has a question for you in the chat.
Yeah.
She said, can I ask why the IPAC event is private?
It's private because they specifically asked us to do an event with them. So it's going to be similar to like the OJRC Don't Shoot Portland event that we did, or like the Rotarians event. That's correct, Commissioner Yume. IPAC is from 3 to 4:30. And you can find all that info. I'll put the link in there again to the spreadsheet so that you all can check it out. Did that answer your question, Faith?
You said yes in the chat.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Awesome. Yeah, of course. So yeah, if any of y'all can make time in your as you're already getting ready to present a huge policy report document next month, you know, if you have time to come out and shake some hands and just meet people. It was a pretty awesome experience today to be out there with the youth. So really important work being done. And yeah, that's all I got. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the next item in the agenda is gonna review the values and goal. And before we move to discussing any document with inputs and more, we will review values and goal. I will pass it to the staff or the co-chairs, Commissioner Co-Chair Charlie at staff.
I think I'm starting and then passing it to co-chairs.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead, staff.
So the commission adopted values and goals on March 24th, 2022, which sounds like forever ago. And in large part, the document that you're about to discuss is the document that you agreed then to hold yourselves to these goals when discussing. So it's a 4-page document. We'll scroll through it as we are doing every meeting now. There's an introductory part that lists out the 6 values. Associated with each value is 1 or 2 goals, and then associated with them as well are several success criteria or considerations, which are effectively self-selected metrics to hold your future recommendations to. As you're going through these, the prior agreement was to ensure that the things that you recommend out fulfill and uphold these values and goals. So here's the table. Numbers 3 and 5 are a little bit broken up and will be broken up in terms of a page break. So we'll kind of scroll through those a little bit slower. So I'll just stop now and pause for a moment, and then we'll pass it to co-chairs in just a second. Sorry about that. Yeah, number 5 is split into across this page break. anyone would like this to be scrolled back up, please just mention it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and say it. While we're doing that, I'll just ask co-chairs in light of the contents of what's coming up in today's meeting, if there's any particular values or goals that success criteria considerations that you would like to highlight as to keep in mind.
Commissioner. Gomez?
Co-chair, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Facilitator Yamide. Co-chair Dan, go ahead.
Sure. I was waiting for Co-Chair Michelle Wesley, who usually chimes in during this part, but I will say that one of the things that we are going to be talking about tonight is, well, just about everything that we're talking about tonight are parts of the code that we're trying to make sure encompass number 5, the community-centered part, and number 4, transparency and trustworthiness, fight the system that we're up against, I guess. So just bear that in mind, that we're trying to build a code that will allow for the system that we're envisioning to happen to the extent it can. I guess that's what I would say.
Thank you. Co-chair Charlie.
Yes, usually I go before we start discussing the documents, so I wasn't really prepared right then and there. Usually I ask anyone who worked on these documents to maybe chime in, but I won't put you on the spot. I guess I just want to say that, you know, to keep these values and goals in mind as we review these documents, and you know, to try to stay true and support fidelity, I guess, around all of them, but, you know, real accountability, justice. So thank you.
Thank you, Co-chair Charlie.
Thanks. And the only other one that I think might be worth mentioning that came up earlier was the first one under transparency and trustworthiness, about exercising independent judgment without external interference. That's all I had, so I'll pass it back to facilitators.
Thank you, staff. Okay, next, can we be on slide 15, please? Now we're gonna have an open discussion, and we're gonna be review of checklists, discussion group reports, community input tracker, equity review, etc. Next member can discuss anything that come up in their document review that you like to bring to your colleagues' attention. That may help in updating the documents later today. Members volunteer at previous meetings to read and report back. In addition to reporting back, you can discuss anything that comes from these documents that might help you develop your code recommendations. Next slide, thank you. We ask you to follow our normal discussion rules. Please be brief each time you speak, even though you can speak multiple times. Please be facilitator, and remember that we use a weighted stack in our discussions. Finally, please be forward-looking in your comments. Who would you like to get us started? And I also will pass it first to the co-chairs. Thank you. Yes, co-chair Dan.
Well, again, like my co-chair said, I mean, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if anybody finished reading those documents that we have in the list, the checklist, the discussion group reports, the community input tracker, when we did get that back before our last discussion, and the equity reviews, if you want to just give a brief report back to the rest of the group about anything that you found that you think is going to help us as we move forward, that would be great, because we're down to the last few weeks here, and anything we can do to incorporate all those things and make sure we're on track to finish would be great.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Commissioner Faith.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Faith Aiken. I use she, her pronouns. I volunteered to read several of the reports and I've made it through one. So I'll just give a brief recap. The first one I've made it through is the report out on the focus group from folks with disabilities and some general themes that were brought out were kind of general confusion that this was even happening, a lack of trust between police and the community, a general sense of how complicated the system is in general. And it seems like some conflation between safety and accountability and just general confusion. I thought this was an interesting quote that I'm happy to read. It's on page 6. Something that everyone really mentioned was that concept that there seems to be a big disconnection between civilians and police and feeling like needs are being met. And because there's so much separation there, it makes it really hard to feel confident in our police to take care of us and that kind of stuff. And it just creates a lot of anxiety. It creates a lot of stress because you'll have a lot of situations where you go to ask for help and maybe you're not getting the help that you need. Maybe you're not getting the type of help that they could offer, and that makes it really hard and it makes the big challenge there. I think one of the interesting things that they brought up was, I know we've heard some criticism on our recommendation of 33 board members. From their focus group, it came out of, will there be enough alternates to be able to keep the 33 member full? And then now I'm just looking at page 11. Sorry, I'm going fast. Thank you for your scrolling. These were the recommendations that came. So increase in equity training, penalties and incentives for behavior change, public investigations on backgrounds, follow up with complaints promptly and culturally responsible, accessibility and inclusivity in systems, transparency, and they encourage us to continue to listen and learn. Thank you. That's all I got.
Thank you, Commissioner Faith. Thank you. And now I will pass it to Commissioner Connie and then Commissioner Casey.
Good evening. I'm Commissioner Connie Wan. I use she, her pronouns. I volunteered to read the PAC discussion group report on the houseless communities. First, I'd like to say I was really happy to see that so much of this work was done. The outreach to the various communities is what is going to make this work potent and comprehensive. So just commending LMS and the groups that we worked with in order to acquire these various reports. There's no surprise that there's a lot of similarity to what Commissioner Aiken just stated as far as what the disability community and also is echoed again in the houseless community. So of course, access to the various tools that will be presented, the lack of trust with the current system and current sort of policing community that exists. One thing that I found particularly unique to what the houseless community had kind of reported back was that they felt that it was important to acknowledge the need for mental health services for the actual police officers as well, that it was something that they saw as, almost like an empathetic extension of services that should be provided, on both sides. So not necessarily just those that might experience some police brutality, but even the officers themselves. And I think that it's an important extension of again empathy and acknowledgement that, like, the system may attract certain people, and that hurting may be a condition of individuals hurting. So that was a particular takeaway I had. And then, just kind of going over the recommendations, again, they very much echo the disability community. And then it's like about building trust and mutual respect. I think if we look at number 4, it's like the increased mental health resources being available to officers, again, like really stood out to me as sort of a unique call out particularly. And then of course the like accessible and inclusive systems of policing and misconduct. Another thing I thought that was particularly unique about this report was that the accessibility piece is, quite, I think, different for houseless community as far as like access to computers and things and addresses and paperwork processing and systems that aren't necessarily like could be taken for granted for those that don't have access to these tools all the time. So I think that is another part that like the system that can create accessibility. So overall, it was a very similar sort of reaction and response that comes from the other communities that outreach was done to. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Connie. Commissioner Casey?
So I read the report from people living with mental illness, and I think that the thing that really struck me about it was we've been sort of hearing all of these sort of murmurs and accounts of, oh, do people really want this anymore, particularly sort of from City Hall. And the answer emphatically in this report, at least, was people really, really still think that this is important. And they think that our current system is broken and opaque and not understandable. And I think that the sort of sense that I got was the concern is less, are we going to have too much accountability, and more, are we still not going to have enough accountability after the system is in place? And do we actually have the power in the work that we are doing to overcome sort of the structural barriers and the opposition by the union and everything? And I think that people with mental illness particularly feel vulnerable to an unaccountable police system, which is reflected in some of these comments, but also reflected in the fact that people with mental illness are disproportionately affected by police violence.
Thank you, Commissioner Casey. Is there any other reporting or comments? No. Okay. We can then move on the next item on the agenda. We can either take a short break and then come back for the draft and start talking about the draft city code. Let's do that. There is 7:12, and let's come back at 7:18 and start with the draft city code. Thank you. Okay, thank you. We're going to resume the meeting. Now we will move to discussing the preliminary draft of the city code recommendations. This is the first time the PAC will be discussing this document. Here is the planned timeline to finish the document. It may take more or less time, but this is the goal. Next, we'll do a quick walkthrough of the document. Okay. The document you are about to see is long. Oh, I will pass it to staff. Go ahead, staff.
Yeah, well, it's true. The document is long. If you can put the slide back up, please, that has the 5 sections on it. I think it's 1 or 2 forward from here. Yeah. So to help walk through it, there's going to be sort of 2 preview things before getting to the main body of this conversation. And so it's broken into 5 sections. Those correspond to some degree to the areas of agreement. There are some differences there, and that's based off of just the way that code is organized and all of that. So there's 34 existing sections of city code. So the proposed 35 section relates to the Community Police Oversight Board, approved by the voters as part of the charter. 35A is general, and we'll talk about what is in powers and duties in a moment. All the definitions were put together, things like that. 35B is the board. 35C is the office. 35D is administrative investigations, which has a large portion of access to information looped in with the officer accountability documents that you approved in the past. And then structural oversight is 35E, which is policy recommendations for the most part. There are some portions of reporting that's in powers and duties. There is some aspect of structural oversight that also ended up in powers and duties also, and broader system as well. But that's the sections that we'll be talking about today. There is that index that was also put out alongside the document to help note that. And if anyone has any questions as we go through this about where that portion came from, what areas of agreement document it came from, please feel free to ask, and either co-chairs or staff can kind of answer where the ideas behind that were previously discussed by the members. There are 7 items which relate to sections of this code, which there are proposed changes on, and which will be the first things discussed today. The first few relate to what was officer accountability and the remainder to board membership, or in other words, to 35D on administrative investigations, and to 35B on the Community Board for Police Accountability. But before that, co-chairs would like to review the first part of the document. So we'll show that now.
Thank you, staff. Now I will pass it to the co-chairs.
All right, I think I'm going to take this intro, and if anybody else wants to jump in, let me know. But so everybody, this is the code that we've been building up to for a year and a half, and it's slightly different format from what we're used to because it's not an area of agreement. This is what's going to be in the city code. So each of these subsections that we have this index that helps you figure out what they are, but each one of them reflects one or more of the areas of agreement, because sometimes things got combined because it made sense to do that. So before we jump into some of the areas that we need to change, I suggested that we should look at this very opening part, which is just the basic laying the groundwork of what this system is going to be like, and just have everybody read it themselves, so we don't have to spend time reading the paragraphs, because we have a 94-page document here. And then if there's anything that jumps out at you that we need to change, as usual, Victoria will help you propose those changes. But otherwise, hopefully we can just support this as it is. Unfortunately, I've heard that there's some changes that are coming to this still, so we may have to revisit this again. But I'm just hoping that tonight we can kind of look at this and approve it to the extent that we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair. And then we will move to each commissioner reading these parts.
No, this part we're going to hope, everybody reading it to themselves for now.
Yes.
So just reflecting on this, most of it comes directly out of the charter, except for the language that we use to name the board and the office. Does anybody have concerns or anything?
Yes, Commissioner Casey.
I know it's wordsmithing, but I figure if ever there's a time for wordsmithing, it is now. The last sentence in section B that says, make recommendations regarding police practices, policies, and directives to the Portland Police Bureau, and with a primary focus on community concerns. I don't think, if I'm reading the sentence correctly, that and needs to be there. I think it should just be with a primary focus on community concerns.
I think you're right.
Thank you, Commissioner Casey. Is there any, yeah, go ahead, Co-Chair Dan.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I left myself unmuted, but yeah, I'm looking at that's actually in the charter, but it doesn't belong there. So I think it's okay for us to clean that up.
Okay. Is there any additional comments or questions for this part? Okay. It's just, okay, I'm gonna ask the question, maybe I don't need to, but is there a, should I ask just, can we move on stuff, or you need to ask the questions?
I think we do need to ask the questions to make the change.
Okay. Is there any strong opposition to make the change from what it was to what Commissioner Casey is proposing? Is there a general agreement to make the change from what it was to the Commissioner Casey is proposing? Thank you. Can we move on? Okay. Let's move on.
Well, staff, I'm looking at the agenda in my hand, and it says board membership first, but we talked about doing officer accountability first.
Yeah.
Is there any legal problem with us switching the order?
I don't believe so, if it's okay with you all, co-chairs. And
That's what we talked about.
anything else on this
Yeah.
particular section, ABC?
Yeah, what we discussed at the pre-meeting was let's go to officer accountability next. So what we're going to try to do with these is, you know, sort of, because we have so limited time, we have no idea if we'll get through the 94 pages. So we're going to focus on the parts where we have some draft text for you all, and I'll try to explain the meaning, or the reason we are trying to put in the new text. I'll have Commissioner Co-Chair Michelle Wesley read those proposed changes, and then we'll have discussions. And then hopefully we'll vote on them, so to speak, consent on them. So, and then I guess what we wanted to do too was just go to the main header of the section on, yeah, we want to go to the main header on the section about the officer accountability, just to show the top of it, and then scroll down until we get to the part where the changes are. I think that would be good. And we've had the discussion instructions read to us earlier in the meeting.
Yes,
Thank you.
we have our normal discussion rules or guidelines. We ask you to be brief. Anyone can speak multiple times. We're asking to be facilitator, and we're asking to be looking forward. Thank you. I will pass it to the co-chairs.
All right, so so the officer accountability is 35D. Is that correct, staff? Just help me along here a little bit.
In 35D, and this is the longest part. There are 24 unique subsections in here. So the proposed changes are pretty deep into it, but and some of the sections are pretty short. But yeah, it begins with 35D.010.
Okay, great. So yeah, so I mean, you'll recognize, like I said, a lot of this language is from the areas of agreement directly. Oops, that was a big jump. So I would hopefully, so we got A, B, C, D, and E there.
Just a moment.
All right. A, B, C, D, and E are the first parts of the Administrative Investigation Code. And we got an F about interviews, and G about the officer retirements, possibly, an H about the board investigate complaints submitted anonymously, and I about may not be enough information, and J about reviewing all investigations to be sure they're complete. Then we have, oh wow, O20, which is about timelines. Okay, let's go to O30, which is about providing information to complainants. I didn't realize how long this was. Sorry, folks. O40 is about referral of criminal investigations. Go to O40. O50 is about who's able to file. And O60 is that really long section where we listed every kind of complaint that will be investigated or incidents that could be investigated. O70 is about the filing timelines. O80 is about how to file complaints. And we have an unnumbered section about intake. That's probably O90 on the version I'm looking at. Yeah, so I think this is O90 about intake. And .100 is initial case handling. 110 is informal. Oh, so we're trying to get to 220. Let's not belabor something. So then we got mediation, which is kind of a different concept. And 130 is about the dismissals. 140 is about taking interim measures. And this is one of the ones where we have a proposed change. You. Sorry about all that. We're all sort of seeing this for the first time, maybe, folks. So you'll see the highlighted yellow part is a part that is something we need to review. So I'm going to hand it over to Commissioner Co-Chair Michelle Wesley to read this into the record, but I'm going to give a background explanation that the original text said place an officer on wasn't place an officer on, it was suspend an officer while the administration charges are pending, and suspension is a kind of disciplinary action, so it's better for us to suggest just that they go on administrative leave. And we had questions along the way whether it's paid or not, and we're not capable as the commission, nor is the council directly capable of making that decision, so we're just leaving the term whether it's paid or not out of here. So Co-Chair Michelle Wesley, if you would read number 2 into, oh, well, actually, why don't you read the whole thing, A1 and A2?
Okay, yeah. Gonna read this into the record. Okay, so board authority to take interim measures. A, the board can take interim steps prior to findings being determined in specific cases. 1, a case can be prioritized if an officer is retiring or being promoted. 2, the board can recommend placing an officer on administrative leave while administrative charges are pending. So any input on that or questions or?
Yes, Commissioner Yumi.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, doesn't this already takes place automatically for an officer involved shooting or use of deadly force, right? So is this for other allegations then, in other words? Okay.
Thank you. Is there any additional questions, comments, or edits before I pass it to co-chair Dan? You wanted to do a brief explanation, right? No?
No, I think the explanation I did before is probably okay,
Okay.
unless anybody else has any more questions.
Okay, let me see. Then I will ask the question if there's no more comments or questions. Okay. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to what it is now? And this section highlighted. Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to what is now? Thank you. Can we move on?
We're going to give a moment for the staff to affirm that we fixed that before we move on.
Thank you.
We have to kind of cross all our T's and dot all our I's. I'm going to cross my I's as well. I'm starting to fall asleep from all this text. So then when you're ready, staff, to move on, I'll wait for that. Okay. So then 150 is, wow, I just managed to knock my own screen out of whack. Police Bureau witnesses. 160 is about subpoenas. I think that's in all caps. Oh, that's okay. We'll get to that later. 170 is about procedures to deadly force and deaths in custody. 180 is about the hearings panels. 190 is where we're going to stop and talk. So let's see. So contextually, again, this is about the panels that are going to hear the cases, which is a subset of the full commission, the full board. And it starts out talking about how they can examine the documents they need to, and then I'll have Commissioner Michelle Wesley read all of Section B, which it looks like there's two Bs, but the first Section B, and there's a bunch of new language in here. And so the background on this is that it's unclear how many of, and I think we talked about this a little bit before, it's unclear how many of the hearings will be held in public depending on a bunch of factors, some of which we're going to talk about a little later on in the text, I think. But the idea that we originally put in here was that it would be public comment during the hearing. And obviously, if the community is not allowed into an executive session, they can't comment during the hearing. So these are some solutions to try to get at making sure there's going to be some kind of community input before or during the meeting, depending on what's possible. So Commissioner Michelle Wesley, if you read, starting with the top of B and then read through the new sections, which are 2, 3, and 4. I mean, read 1 as well.
Okay, got it. All right, B. The panel shall hold a preliminary hearing to assess the completeness and readiness of the investigation for a full hearing. 1, the complainant and officer, I lost my place, will be notified of the date of the preliminary hearing, but are not required to attend. They may appear with any or all of their support persons. 2, the board shall publicly announce with the case number and date of the preliminary fact-finding hearing at least 7 days in advance of the hearing. This notice shall also include methods by which members of the public who may have information or evidence can contact an assigned investigator. 3, the board will decide whether the preliminary hearing will be held in open session or executive session in accordance with existing legal standards and considering the public interest, the officer's preference, precedent set by the existing oversight system, and other relevant factors. And you wanted me to go to 3.4 as well. At the commencement of the preliminary hearing, the presiding individual shall state that members of the public who may have additional information or evidence should contact an assigned investigator prior to the full hearing. The presiding individual may allow members of the public to express their opinion about the readiness of the case, consistent with state law and collective bargaining agreements.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any questions, comments, or edits? Yeah, staff?
So just to add one piece, there's another proposed change that's sort of part of the whole.
Okay.
Well, I just was a little bit off screen. This is the end of the subsection, so you can see what the C is about what the panel can do. D is about that the decision is an open session, and E talks about public comment. And to some degree, there are two types of ideas in this proposed change, and you're going to see these two things in another section. The part that's not highlighted, the 2, 4, and E down below, are about public involvement in the session, and the highlighted part is about the methodology for determining whether the hearing is open or closed. And so you're going to see this pattern repeated in another section later on about the full hearings, but in the context of preliminary hearings, this is the proposed changes.
Thank you, staff. And now I will pass it to Commissioner Sophia.
Thank you. Thank you. I had a question because I can't get to the full document and I don't know exactly where it is, but I wanted to see if this replaced or is in addition to where the officer can request an open hearing. Is that a different section? Because I had a comment on that, but if this is something in addition to, I don't need to have a comment on it.
Okay, and I will pass it to Co-Chair Dan to answer your question.
Thank you for your question, Commissioner Glenn. So the highlighted yellow part is where that's included. So when it says the officer's preference, that's what that's referring to, that the officer can request an open hearing. We also have the public interest, which is one of the things that the state law allows the board to decide to have an open hearing based on the public interest. And the precedent set by the oversight system is that they have open meetings of the CRC and the city council right now, and then other relevant factors. So anything else the board might make a decision, decide whether to hold it in an open hearing or not. Does that answer your question, I hope?
Yes, it does, because I had a concern. I've been thinking about this off and on for quite a while, and the way we had the language prior to this was that an officer could choose. And I also think that the other party that's actually filing the complaint should have that opportunity too. And I'll tell you why. Being on the other side of some of these things, when a hearing is open, you are allowing people into your life, all of your personal business. And for whatever reason, someone may not want an open hearing to protect themselves, so that they don't have to keep getting re-traumatized, stigmatized, and all sorts of things. So I wanted to make sure that there was some leeway for the person who's filing the complaint to be able to request a closed hearing or not have it open, even if the officer would like to have that open. So considering the language you have here, I hadn't studied how I would word that. So I just wanted to hear comments from others while I try to figure some of this out. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Co-Chair Dan.
Yeah, I would add right where the staff was about to type it in after officer's preference. concerns of the complainant. And we did actually have a whole paragraph about why you can go into executive session that included privacy reasons for the complainant. And that may still exist. This is the preliminary hearing. That may still exist in the full hearing section. We'll see when we get down there. But let's address your concern?
Yeah, I wanted to just add, why couldn't it be the preference of the complainant? Why does it have to be the concern? I mean, you can put either or.
Oh, okay. I'm understanding what you're saying. So I think the reason I use that language is that the officer's preference is something that's encoded in state law that says they get to decide if they want to have an open hearing or not. But the thing about the what the complainant wants to do is what we're adding here based on your very legitimate what you've raised.
Thank you.
So that's why, you know, the complainant's concerns they can't override it if the officer requests an open hearing, but they can say, I want my part of the hearing to be in executive session, I think, if we do it that way.
So they can't say that they don't. Okay, I get where you're going at. And
right, I'm trying to balance the legal issues that we have and what we're trying to do for the community. That's what I said in the beginning. This is one of these tricky things we're going to have to deal with all night.
right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And
So staff, like I said, I think we should say the complainant's concerns so that it doesn't sound like we're equating what the law says about the officer and what we're offering the complainant.
thank you, Commissioner Dan. I will pass it to Commissioner Debbie.
I just have a question. Is it possible for the complainant, if they are fine with an open hearing, to ask to not use their name, like under the current system? Does anybody know the answer to that?
Yes, Commissioner Co-Chair Dan.
Muted. I don't know the answer to that, but the thing is, if we don't include it in code, that can be something that the board can decide on later.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Sophia, would you like to say something or just use the chat?
I had just put it in the chat that I'd like to see both concern and preference, and then you know, and then maybe we can ask for some legal advice on which one is appropriate or how we should word that. I'm just not sure if we should leave preference out, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sophia. Yes, Commissioner Jumi.
Yeah, I mean, I think I see Commissioner Dan's point about making sure that there's a distinction between things that we're sort of obligated to do versus things that we can take under consideration. If, to Commissioner Sophia's point, if she feels strongly about having some similar parity in the language, then perhaps we should say the officer's preference as, you know, stipulated under, you know, state whatever. I guess the other question I had about this is, are we going to work this language into every section where it's applicable, or is it something that could be at the beginning of the document? Because we're going to come back to this for the other subsequent hearings, right?
Thank you. And I will let the staff to answer.
Parts of this are the same proposed edits in other places, but there are some different rules around it. And also there are some different potential outcomes to some of these as well, especially around the public involvement side. And I'm happy to take any questions back to legal review, but also just one thing that may be noted is preference for the officer is actually a request. So maybe if you're trying to have the word preference in, but also ensure that there are different terms to reflect the different legal status of whether when an officer makes expresses something, a desire to have it be that way, request might be helpful to fix it on that end. But I'm happy to put pending legal review in anything as well.
Thank you, staff. Commissioner Sophia?
Yes, my concern with the terms is that it seems in my mind, the way it's written, that the officer's preference may outweigh the complainant's, I don't know if it's a right or what you would call it for privacy. So complaint, we don't want to penalize a complainant, right, for complaining about something. But if they want to do this privately, as we said that they could, anonymously, there should be some way for them to do that. And I know Commissioner Debbie mentioned if they could somehow do that, but that's my concern. That's what I'm trying to weigh at this point with the way the wording is. And that's why I was suggesting maybe we get some legal counsel on how to preface this properly, but that's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Co-Chair Dan?
Well, first I want to see if anybody's watching the clock to see if we're reaching the 5 minutes on this item. Well, we should resolve it if we can. So the reason I am reluctant to change the proposal is that the complainants, many of the complainants may want the meetings to be open, and then the officer will have the legal ability to say, no, I do not want to do that. I want to have a meeting in private. But then the board can say, well, this particular case is so important to the community, we're going to have it open. So all the interest has to be weighed against it. That's why this is a list of different things to consider when they're talking about it. So, you know, we could say the complainant's preference, but they cannot override the officer's preference in some cases. I just worried about. I think we should have different words because they're different things that are being weighed. That's what I'm getting at.
Thank you. Commissioner Jumi?
Yeah, and I'm not sure to direct this to Dan or staff or council, but if I'm understanding correctly, if the officer wants it in open session, broadly speaking, we don't have a choice. It has to be an open session, correct? If the officer wants it in closed session and we want it in open session, we have the discretion there. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, Commissioner Delgado, I believe that what Commissioner Glenn has brought up is that if the complainant, if a community member says, I don't want to speak in public, then the parts of the hearing where they would have to be speaking or presenting, those that, you know, the board could accommodate that by going to executive session for their part of it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional questions, comments? Co-Chair Charlie?
Just real quick then, couldn't we put that in here, that wording in here? That portion of the complainants, I don't know, it's not testimony, but whatever it is, can't be taken into executive. If preferred or whatever.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Commissioner, Co-Chair, okay, Co-Chair Charlie again?
Oh, no.
Okay.
So I think we're making this a little more complicated than it has to be. I think what's missing, and what I thought was in here, is it said the board shall decide whether some or all of the preliminary hearing will be held in open session or executive session.
Oh.
I think if we some or all, then that will cover the ability to move in and out of executive session as needed. Not some or all of.
Thank you.
Staff. OF of.
Staff?
Sorry, I left it raised there for a minute. The one thing that should be noted is that, and I can't remember the ORS off the top of my head, but it's the same one that's cited for executive sessions of the PAC. But it does, I'll pull it up. I found that note here. That may help in terms of clarifying what can be put into executive session if the officer requests it to be open. And this is state law. And yeah, here it is. So it's ORS 192.660, which is the legal authority to do it. And KC, I see your hand, so I may just let you explain it, but it's 2B, just to clarify, and I'll stop talking here and leave it out.
Thank you. Commissioner Casey?
I just wanted to sort of say, I agree that I would like the complainant to have the same opportunities as the officer, but unfortunately, the officer as an employee of the city has rights that the complainant doesn't have and that we don't have the ability to override. So I think that we can make it so that it basically, it's what Commissioner Yume said, is we can give the complainant all the rights that are available within sort of the sphere that exists, but we can't say if the officer is exercising their rights, the complainant can override those rights, because those rights exist in state law.
Thank you, Commissioner Casey. Staff?
Yeah, Commissioner Yume, could you please remind me where you wanted to include that citation? Was it after the officer preference?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Just put something in there, and then perhaps that would satisfy, Commissioner Gwen's concern. We could just say the complainant's preference, since we've already carved out the ORS requirement.
So just to clarify, Commissioner, you're saying that concerns would change to preference?
If that's what Commissioner Gwen feels strongly about and there's no objection, I'm fine with that.
Okay, is there any Commissioner Sophia or anybody has additional comments?
I think we might have lost. Oh, there she is. Okay. Like, where'd she go?
Okay, then I will ask the question. Then, is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the new proposed changes? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the new proposed changes? Okay, thank you.
Quick question, was Commissioner Arce, were you raising your hand to agree earlier, or were you raising your hand to object?
I just had a question whether.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Monica.
I'm just a little worried that having the complainant's preference is going to go against the rules that are already written in state law. Was that the concern?
Staff?
Just to clarify a process note here, we'll be sending it to legal review. Just all new text will be going to legal review because all the text that's already there has been reviewed. So happy to get that information back. It may not happen, live, but if you know something is against law, then obviously don't add it in the rest of the meeting. But if it's something where there's a question, please feel free to discuss it, and then we'll get a comment back to you. Thanks.
Thank you. Co-Chair Dan.
Yeah, I just would say to Commissioner Arce that I think that this list, it's a list of things to consider. It doesn't say what weight to give them or what the legal, backbone is to any of them. It just says these are the things to consider.
Okay, thank you. Then I will do again the question. Okay, I will ask first this question and then I will ask for 2, 4, and E together. But first this one. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Just the highlighted. Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Now can we move on? I can ask the next for the next items. And the next items is 2, 4, and E together. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed changes? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed changes? Thank you. Can we move on?
So again, I want to wait for staff to have time to accept the changes. So that'll give people time to think a little bit. And I will going to pull up my other copy of the document and scroll down. So the next part is actually in the very next section, which is 35D.200, people playing along at home. And I'll give you without showing it on the screen, while staff is doing that, I'll give you a little bit of background. So this is about the hearing panel. And so that was the preliminary hearing. So this is for the full hearings process. And a lot of this language is the same. And we will probably need to make the changes to the determination of whether it's going to be an executive session to match what we just did. But there was a section B that we put in as kind of an overall comment about having the public be able to speak during the hearings. And I've said this before, but it's in current city code that the public has the right to comment before there's a vote. But that isn't the CRC meetings, which is part of a recommendation, a system that recommends to the chief and the commissioner police. Whereas this new system, our board is going to be the decision maker. So, but we're trying to carve out the ability for them to take public input to the extent that that's going to be allowable. So that's where a lot of this language is coming from. All right, so co-chair Michelle Wesley, would you read B, D, and E, which are the things that we're proposing to add?
Did you say that again? B, C, and D?
B, D, and E.
B, D, and E.
The three of them that are.
Oh, okay, I see them. All right. The board shall welcome public involvement in this process to the extent consistent with the law. D is the board shall publicly announce with a case number the date of the full fact-finding hearing and at least 7 days in advance of the hearing. This notice shall also include methods by which members of the public who may have information or evidence can contact an assigned investigator. And E, the board will decide whether some of or all of the full fact-finding hearing will be held in open session or executive session in accordance with existing legal standards and considering the public interest, the officer's preference. Let's see, Org 192.660 to B, the complainant's preference, precedent set by the existing oversight system and other relevant factors. That's a mouthful.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any questions, comments, or edits? Yes, staff?
I just wanted to note that similarly to the last one, there is a trailing portion that's a little later on that relates. So it's part of procedures for the hearings. And this is analogous to the one earlier that said about public comment in the preliminary hearing. It just follows afterwards and says this.
Staff, let's just get to that when we get to it. Let's just keep going in order. I think it's fine. Let's just look at these three, E, D, and E, take care of them. We'll get through.
Okay, thank you. No comments, no questions, edits. Okay, I will ask the questions. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you.
Great. Now, so while staff is cleaning that up and getting that affirmed for us, I'll tell you the next part for anybody who can still follow along is down as staff was saying. Oh, go ahead.
Before you continue to the next item, I just gonna ask, can we move on? That way you can continue with the next item. Yes, can we move on? Okay, co-chair. Yeah, you continue. Thank you.
Okay, well, we've sort of set this new whatever ground rule or something where we're going to wait for the staff to be done before we move on. So I was trying to give them time to catch up with us, but I'm glad to be able to move on as soon as they're ready. So here we go. The next part, as was introduced to you briefly, is in subsection K of the same part under procedure for the hearings. And I see something here under K3C that we have highlighted in yellow.
Yeah,
staff.
it's a new concept, different from the ones that were just discussed, whereas this one was sort of related. So if you...
Okay, I'm just trying to go in order. So let's move.
All right, so there is, from there's who can be at the hearing in G, there's about information, decision-making, the sort of pre-warning, and then there's the procedure for the hearings. And in there is this text, which may not be able to be resolved just yet, but yeah, just wanted that is about who can ask questions. And yeah.
Well, so just as a brief point of explanation, this is pretty much what we had in concept, that the presiding officer would really be the only person doing the questioning, and everything would be directed through them. And I think that the statute that's cited here has to do with no more than 2 individuals can question the officer over the course of the hearing. So it's just to make sure that the board doesn't accidentally violate that statute by having more than 2 people ask questions. If you're ready, staff, then I'll have Co-Chair Michelle Wesley read the actual text into the record.
Ready?
Please.
Okay. C, except as otherwise provided here, only the presiding individual shall ask questions of the officer, including on behalf of other people attending the hearing. At the presiding individual's discretion, the presiding individual may designate 1 panel member or 1 staff person to question the officer, in addition to the presiding individual themselves. However, no more than 2 individuals may question the officer over the course of the hearing. ORS 236.360.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Okay, is there any questions, edits?
Commissioner.
Yeah, Commissioner, thank you, Facilitator Yamide. Commissioner Monica?
Is there a way to add here that if this, if ORS 236.360 changes in the future, that this change should be reflected? I just don't like having this as something that is just set in stone forever.
Co-Chair Dan? Thank you, Commissioner Monica.
That is an excellent point, and we should kind of reword this the way we're trying to reword everything so that it's flexible if the laws or rules change. So let's take a look back at the text. So instead of, however, unless allowed by state law, no more than 2 individuals may question the officer over the course of the hearing.
Commissioner Sophia.
I was just thinking of that being applied to the previous one. I know we already voted on it, but we were stating the code for the law and the other about the complainant and open cases, but I don't know if that's applicable. It seems like it should be applicable there as well, just in case it changes.
Yes, staff.
Yeah, just one thing to keep in mind throughout this process is, and this was actually, it's funny, earlier on discussed at the very beginning, sections A, B, and C of the very first section. You may recall there was I'll just find it here, the discussion, and the immediate next section has to do with the board commitment to continuous improvement and what happens there. And so it may be something just to keep in mind that should there be a change to higher order law, that could activate, you know, the board being able to, the way you've written it allows for that. And instead of, it may not always be prudent to write in an activation automatically for each and everything, because I can see this happening many times throughout this document. So just keep that in mind. That's not to say you shouldn't, but just kind of keep that in mind that there is sort of a general provision in place that allows the board to reevaluate itself and propose changes to code, including to all the different parts that are in this document, should there be a change to higher order law as well.
Thank you, staff. I will pass it to Commissioner Jimmy.
Yeah, I just kind of echoing what Samir said. I think, and I'm obviously not an attorney, but my understanding is that city code really doesn't entertain very many hypotheticals, right? It's meant to address what is as it exists currently, and then if something changes, then council will consider changes to the code. One way that we could get around it in this specific case, I suppose, is you could say, at the presiding individual's discretion, the presiding individual may designate as many other panel members as allowed by state law, or something like that, if we're really concerned about leaving that window in there. But I think a lot of these, as Samir said, you know, are things where we could write so many, contingencies into this thing that we'd be here, until December. So I personally don't think we need it in here, but if people feel strongly about it, I would encourage them to just cut most of this paragraph and just say, designation, as per state law or something like that.
Thank you, Commissioner Jimmy. Is there any more suggestions or questions? I don't know if the staff will adopt Commissioner Jimmy comments. Co-chair Dan.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm going to address this for, Commissioner Grant, I'm going to come back to your point, I promise. So I think we should cut the last sentence. I agree with you. You should say, at the presiding individual's discretion, the presiding individual may designate as many panel members or staff members to question the officer, in addition to the presiding individual themselves, as provided by state, as allowed under state law. Instead of one panel member or one staff member, so as many panel members or as many staff persons. instead of one panel member, say as many panel members or as many. Yeah, that's good. Thanks for editing on the fly. Yeah. I think that ORS recitation can just be in a footnote.
There,
Oh, sorry, staff.
Yeah.
yeah, I think to kind of quote or repurpose Commissioner Yume's note, and maybe if either of the attorneys who are here who are members would like to jump into, I'm not certain that footnotes are going to be permissible in the final code. Just but they do have parentheticals in them, so maybe that's something we can check in with city attorney's office on how they want us to receive it.
I understand that, Steph. My point is that because we're saying if it's consistent with state law, if that state law gets gutted, then there's no point in having it in the code. So we're just saying consistent with state law, and it can be that way. If the state law changes, that's not still in the city code.
Thank you. And Commissioner Yomi say consistent with ORS.
I don't think we should. I don't think we should cite the specific code, because if it changes, if they change the numbering, it's just say state law. Period. Good enough. So anyway, I'm going to see Commissioner Michelle Wesley. Are you able to read this back into the record the way that's been proposed now?
Sure, but are we need to take out the ORS 236?
I'm really strongly in favor of just saying state law, because we've said that elsewhere, and I don't think we need to cite the exact statute. I think it's going to just cause problems down the line.
Okay, so I'm seeing that Commissioner Yume is visually designating that that's okay. For future reference, if it's proposed, it does go in. So what you'll see on screen reflects any one member can do it. You may end up deciding on it separately if there's disagreement, but just for future reference, one member of the commission proposing something does mean it'll be visually displayed. Just wanted to get that for future. So I did see that it was withdrawn, and that's totally fine. So I'll remove that right now.
Thank you, staff.
Okay, ready? All right, here goes. Going to read it into the record. C. Except as otherwise provided here, only the presiding individual shall ask questions of the officer, including on behalf of other people attending the hearing. The presiding individual may designate panel members or staff persons to question the officer. Consistent with state law.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Now I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. And even if I give in the staff time to make the changes, because Co-Chair Dan will start explaining what is next, I will have to.
Yeah, and actually,
can we move on? Can we move on?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, all right, okay. This part is, as was mentioned by staff, is parallels language that we had in the other section, but this is more, that one was about expressing the opinion about the readiness of the investigation, and this one's about the actual substance of the case. Unless people have questions, I'm not going to go any deeper into it. And I'll ask Commissioner or Co-Chair Michelle Wesley to read the proposed language.
Okay, 7. The presiding, the presiding individual may allow members of the public to express their opinion about the case consistent with state law and collective bargaining agreements.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any questions, comments, or edits? Co-Chair Dan?
I have an important contextual thing. If you can scroll down to number 8, staff. This is before the vote. So this would be, that consideration happens before the vote, but it may not be legal. But right now, we're just saying if it's consistent with state law, they can do it.
Thank you. And I just want to remember, it's a consensus, it's not a vote, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Talking about the vote of the board that's described in the next. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, is there any other changes, questions, edits? Okay, I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on?
Again, while the staff is working on that, what I was going to say about Commissioner Glenn's proposal, I think there's a third place where we have the language inserted about the executive sessions, is that I would do the same thing there that I just suggested for the other paragraph, where we inserted the exact statute that gives the officer the ability to ask for an open hearing. But instead, we should just say, parentheses, consistent with state law. And then that way, if that law changes, then if there's nothing that gives that power more, the officer more authority than the community member, then it will have to just be consistent with state law. So instead of CORS 192.660, blah, 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 just say consistent with state law. That's my proposal. I'm wondering if Commissioner Glenn thinks that's okay.
And Commissioner Glenn says it's okay.
Sorry, it's okay, meaning we don't need to do that, or it's okay, meaning it's okay?
He is, Co-Chair Dan is suggesting to put with the state law instead of, Co-Chair Dan, can you repeat consistent with the state law? Yes, thank you. Are you okay with that?
I stopped there for a second.
It seemed like everybody was okay with that. Commissioner Glenn and Co-Chair.
Thank you. Because there was a change.
Right.
There was the question.
When we're changing an existing change, it just has to be visually displayed differently. So sorry for the delay there.
It's okay. I'm gonna ask the question again.
Briefly, before you do that, can we just accept this in both the places where it already exists?
Okay.
Yeah, I can go back and fix that if it's approved. I don't want to make you all wait while I scroll if that's okay, but it is in 190, 35D.190 for the record, and there will be a third one coming up.
Okay, then I will ask the question. Is that okay? Yeah, thank you. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. I noticed that a couple of commissioners would like to take a short break. And we can take a short break. Is 8:24. We can come back at 8:28. It's a very short break, but at least. Thank you. We'll continue with revising the document with the code. And before we continue, I will pass it to Co-Chair Charlie.
Thank you. I was noticing on that document, it's not up right now, but just scrolling up just a little bit, it says something of something according to law. It just says law instead of like what law. And I'm wondering if we should clarify that.
No, I think that's what we're trying to do. Avoid saying which law. Just
Okay.
we want to say with state law, and then if the state law changes, then if there is no law, then
it doesn't. Oh, but it doesn't say state law. You don't want it to say that?
which font one are you looking at?
Well, I can't see the document. It's not on the screen.
We're gonna wait a little bit for staff to have the document, but staff, do you need to say something?
Yes, sorry, there's, so there is a note on this, and this is something that just prefacing a technical fix that'll be sort of proposed to you to consider, but there are parts where it says applicable, consistent with state law. It specifies, as Charlie, Co-Chair Charlie pointed out, and then there is where is it? Oh, it's with the law, sorry. Something like that, consistent with the law. And this is notable in case consistent with state law doesn't allow for if there's a here, that one is
Yeah.
There may be federal law that's applicable to, and that's something that we were going to look at in terms of a proposed technical fix to just standardize the different terminology there. So what a technical fix is going to look like is a single document with a bunch of little wording changes that are designed to standardize when, for example, bureau versus agency. That's something that, and at this point, it's actually neither. It's office, but there are a couple things like that, and one of them may be consistent with law, existing legal standards, some sort of. There's a bunch of different terminology there. While we're on the subject, it may also be worth noting that there are sometimes collective bargaining obligations as well that may be worth citing. So it's not. I wouldn't. I think it may be a more efficient use of time to kind of do that in one big package of proposed changes, which I think co-chairs had discussed possibly doing on Monday. But yeah, just a thought there. But certainly, where there's federal law, that's not always covered by just saying state law.
Thank you, staff. Is that okay, Co-Chair Charlie? Okay, thank you. Then we can continue. Well, what is next?
All right, so
Co-Chair Dan, I'm sorry,
Yes.
Staff wants to say something
I can
else.
follow after. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, but before we head back into the document, I was kind of running it by co-chairs and staff in the chat. But I think that what I'd like to do is at least get through reading, if we can't even decide on it all, this section and the parts that we're referring to board membership, and that will probably end up going about 10 minutes late. And as I said earlier this month, we're in our last month, and there's no way to extend the deadline. So are people okay with staying about 10 minutes late tonight? Seeing a couple of thumbs up, nodding heads. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's talk. So now we're going into the section called on appeals, which is 35D 240. And wasn't there language that we put in about the deciding? Oh, there we go. Okay. So that yellow section, I'm not sure. Are we ready to discuss that yellow section yet, staff?
Yeah, so earlier we prefaced that there may be a need to add pre-existing text, or not pre-existing, the text you just discussed before the break to this document too, or this subsection as well. It should, just to clear that, there is there's already a statement here that effectively says everything from that you just added to 200 also applies here. So that may not be necessary because you apply the same procedures, including what you added up above. The other two things that are in appeals include these two things, and I'm now considering actually that this is maybe in the wrong place, but there is a law that was brought up, which I'll pull up on screen, that relates to number 3. And then there's the grounds for appeal question, which had been brought up by a couple of members, I believe, including Commissioner KC, that may be relevant as well. But I'll pull up the particular section of the state law related to the highlighted portion. And this section, for those following along at home, is ORS 236.360 and is particularly relevant to the state law around this sort of process. The last section here. So as it relates to the code, relates to the if the appeal is designed to request a reopening of the investigation.
And so is this replacing existing text that we had in there?
The highlighted text is not replacing existing, and neither is replacing existing text.
Okay, well, thanks for the background. So I guess I'm gonna ask Commissioner, Co-Chair Michelle Wesley to read the yellow highlighted text in number 3.
Certainly. Okay, number 3. Appeals that involve a request that the board reopen an investigation will be decided according to applicable law.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any question, edits, or comments for number 3? Okay, then I can move to ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to what is highlighted now? Staff?
I'm sorry, I just wanted to point out that as of right now, this has not been proposed by any member.
Okay.
So it's not this has to be, someone has to say we would like to do it to follow the board's, or the PAC's bylaws.
Okay, no, that's fine. I will wait for any member to propose it. Yes, Commissioner Sophia.
Yes, I propose that we I don't know if I want to say accept this addition for review from the commissioners for acceptance. Is that the way you say it?
Yes, I move to propose, but you did it very good.
Okay. I propose to move that we accept this.
Thank you. Second?
We don't do motions and seconds here, really. I think the staff was just saying somebody has to propose it. So it's been proposed. Let's ask the question again.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Is there a strong opposition to adding this to the proposed changes? Is there a general agreement to add in number 3? Thank you. Can we move on?
Yes, thank you. So the next one is kind of respondent to possible concerns that possibly one day there may be too many appeals for the board to handle, and I'm not convinced that that's going to happen. And I think that it would be better for us to let it play out and have the board make a decision later down the line if they want to start narrowing down the grounds on which people can appeal. So this language should cover them being able to make that decision, how they want to decide what are good grounds for an appeal. So Co-Chair Michelle Wesley, would you read this into the record?
Yes, there's also something in the chat y'all should take a look at. Okay. Number 3.
Yes. Oh, the second number 3, yes.
Yes, agreement.
Okay. Sorry, I was thinking about what was in the chat. The board shall have authority to determine appropriate grounds for appeals and may do so through rulemaking.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any questions, comments, or edits? Okay, this is not highlighted in yellow. That means I can ask the questions before anybody proposes it, because it was already proposed. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on?
All right, so a little background before we head into the next thing. So I believe that completes the parts about officer accountability that we need to change right now. Again, anybody who has time, patience, and energy to go through the code and look for other stuff that might need to be flagged, that would be great. But those were the major things that we came across in our last couple of weeks of work. So now we have to go to the board membership related items. And staff, are you ready to
There
head
is
us
one
into that?
on officer accountability though.
Oh, what's that one?
The name clearing hearing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I forgot about that. Okay, thank you.
So just to put this into the right, this is going back a section. We were in appeals a moment ago. So this is discipline and corrective action. And it talks about the guidelines for imposition of discipline and corrective action. And then it goes into consistency with due process. And under that, there is this particular section. It already references a name clearing hearing here. And the proposed addition is to get more information.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Co-Chair Dan.
Right, so before we get into the specific language, again, the name clearing hearing is something that's a right that's given to the officer if there's going to be conduct that's considered stigmatizing that they can have. It's in addition to the Loudermill due process hearing we've been talking about this whole time, that this is if they're going to be fired and there's stigmatizing conduct. So here's the exact language that we're asking to put in. Co-Chair Michelle West.
Okay, 3A. If the presumptive discipline for the conduct is termination and the conduct is considered stigmatizing, the due process hearing shall also serve as a name clearing hearing.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any questions, comments, or edits to this addition to number 3? No? Okay, let me ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to adding A to number 3? Is there a general agreement to add in A to number 3? Thank you. Can we move on? Thank you.
All right, so I again, I don't have my notes in front of me for the board membership stuff, but I think that's in an earlier section.
Yep, I can get to that.
The staff. It's 35B010 is the board membership section. So let's just start first at 010, just so we can scroll through it. So, you know, 010 describes the board membership itself. Wow, quite a long section. And then, so there's language in the charter about the people needing to be impartial, and we've had discussion about whether or not impartiality is even possible in our society, and so forth and so forth. But that's what it says in the charter. So we're proposing to put in in the guidelines 4 qualifications, which is section 2, section E, that will reflect language that's in the charter. That'll say board members must be capable of making. Oops, sorry, Co-Chair Michelle Wesley. I will let you read it. But now you know why we have it in here.
Okay. E, board members must be capable of making fair and impartial decisions based on the evidence presented to them in an environment where controversy is common. Fairness includes considering lived experience, the experiences of the community members, and of the police officers involved in the case. If there's something else, I can't see it.
I think that's it.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any questions, comments, or edits? Okay. I will ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing E for what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing and adding from what it was to the proposed change? This highlighted here. Thank you.
Thanks, team. So I want to appreciate the rest of the commission for this because it is walking that line between what we were asked to say and what we want it to say for the community, right? Okay, so back to you, Facilitator Victoria.
Thank you. Can we move on? Thank you.
All right, so the next one is about the resignation. We had this long discussion about what to happen if somebody wants to run for office, and so this is kind of a long answer to that question. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but we can have discussion if people have questions about it. Are you ready, Co-Chair Michelle Wesley, to read this very long paragraph?
Yes, I am. Okay. 1A1. Board members seeking election or appointment to a public office shall inform board leadership of their intent to seek office. A board member seeking election or appointment to a public office that will give rise to a conflict of interest shall resign their board membership at the time of their appointment or election. Depending upon the position which they are pursuing, the board member may be required to disclose a conflict of interest upon their decision to run for office or seek appointment. An individual board member who resigns to seek other public office may reapply for a future board vacancy upon conclusion of holding the other public office.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any question, edits, or comments about number 1? No, then I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing and added number 1 as a proposed change? Is there a general agreement to adding number 1 as a proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on?
All right, and I think this is the last one for the evening, although I'm not 100% sure, but this is kind of a complicated one, but let's frame it this way. Right now, to be on the police review board or the citizen review committee, people have to go through a background check. When we were discussing access information, there's some state databases that people cannot access if they have a criminal record, including, I've heard today, including any kind of felony. So regardless of how we feel about that and how we know how debilitating that is to people's lives, it may be hard for some people to perform all their duties as a board member if they don't have access to those databases. But we don't know exactly how that's going to play out. So we tried to put stuff in about the background check that will give leeway to the board members based on whatever state laws are and will be in the future around these criminal background considerations. And so Co-Chair Michelle Wesley, are you willing to read all of these parts of the background check into the record?
Yes, I am. Okay, so C, background checks. All right, prior to a board member being seated, staff shall initiate a criminal background check through an agency other than the PPB or an agency used by PPB for its checks. 2, the nominated entity shall discuss any previous conviction where the substance of the offense would substantially negatively affect their ability to perform their duties if appointed, with the prospective board member about how they would respond to concerns that they're not able to be impartial in discharging their duties. And 3, the nominating entity may opt not to pass an applicant's nomination to City Council after this conversation. And 4, convictions which do not substantially negatively affect the applicant's ability to perform their duties, if appointed, will not be considered by the nominating entity. Wait a minute. Convictions which do not substantially negatively affect the applicant's ability to perform their duties, if appointed, will not be considered for the nominating entity?
Yeah, I saw that earlier today too. It's a double negative. I actually was going to propose a change to that, if that's all right.
Please do.
I proposed that only convictions which substantially negatively affect the applicant's ability will be considered by the nominating entity. So get rid of do not. So only convictions which substantially negatively affect.
Can I read that again? Only convictions which substantially negatively affect the applicant's ability to perform their duties, if appointed, will be considered by the nominating entity.
Facilitator Laura, lead the discussion. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, yes, it's true. Thank you. Thank you, Co-Chair Dan.
Yeah, I was gonna say Commissioner Yumi has their hand up.
Thank you. Commissioner Yumi.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. Well, I'll just propose it now, and then I think we have to tackle them separately. I have no comment on Commissioner Dan's change. I think that's fine. I was going to say just wordsmithing. I think in number 2, or I think as council likes to say, little 2, I would change it to how they would respond to concerns that they are unable, as opposed to they're not able.
Thank you, Commissioner Yumi. Is there any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Christian.
Hi, thank you. I have a question that's just for my curiosity, because I don't think there's really a way to address it. It's without getting really specific with this language, which I feel like is not going to be conducive into the code. But I'm curious what might what an offense that would substantially or negatively affect their ability, someone's ability to perform the duties. What might be an example of that, if anyone has one in their head? Because I feel like I'm having a hard time coming up with one. Just a little confused by that language. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Christian. And Co-Chair Shirley, do you have the answer?
No, I'm just wanting to agree with Christian. I'm still kind of baffled by that. I'm not sure what it's saying, to tell you the truth.
Okay, thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Co-Chair, Commissioner Sophia, would you like to say something?
Yes, I'm feeling like number 4 is a little bumpy. So I wanted to I'm agreeing with everyone in their comments too, but I wanted to clear up the language just a little bit. Only convictions which substantially negatively affect, which now I forgot what I was gonna say. I'll just wait. I'll take someone else. I just lost my thought.
Okay. Co-Chair Charlie, you wanna add something? No? Okay, Co-Chair Dan.
So Commissioner Oriana Bauer, there was a list of specific offenses that was originally proposed for this, and every one of them was something that we kind of found a problem with. Like one had to do with domestic violence, and yeah, I don't want a domestic violence abuser sitting on the new board. I think that would negatively affect their ability to do it. But there are many cases that we've seen over history where the person who was fighting back, the survivor of domestic abuse, was fighting back, and they got convicted. And we don't want to, just broadly say anything to do with domestic violence, because you have to consider it on a case-by-case basis depending on what the actual circumstances were. So that's why we left it vague. Does that help answer your question, both about what might be and what might not be a reason to exclude somebody?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you. I feel like I remember that a little bit. I remember having some discussions about that. It gets lost in the long list of things we worked on. So thanks for the reminder. And yeah, that makes sense to keep it somewhat vague. I just like the vagueness. I feel like anytime there's something vague, I automatically consider how it could be used the other direction as well, like to exclude someone. So that's why I just was curious. But yeah, that makes sense. And that's why I was like, I don't know if I have like a code change proposal, because I'm like, we have to get super specific might not be beneficial to the language in the first place. So it's just this weird tension that always exists. So thanks. I was just curious. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Christian. Commissioner Sophia?
Yes, I was about to put it in the chat, which have a substantial negative effect. I think that's kind of where my wording was going, because it kind of feels bumpy to me. So only convictions which have a substantial negative effect.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Commissioner Charlie, and then Co-Chair Charlie, and then Co-Chair Dan.
Well, just because there's a conviction doesn't mean they can't perform their duties. Will it prevent them from doing certain duties? Yes, but not their ability. Or is that saying the same thing? Because that's not how I'm reading it.
And Co-Chair Dan, do you have the answer?
Well, I have an answer, and I have a kind of a thought, which I'm hoping their staff can confirm for me. So, co-chair Michelle Wesley, their ability to perform their duties is negatively affected if they can't access those databases. So it's, yes, it is the same thing. It's, you know, it is. I mean, the ability is the term that I think we're looking for. For staff, I think that our intent here, we shouldn't put it in the code, but we should definitely put it in the report. Is that the kind of thing that can go in the report, that, you know, the intent behind this? Because I know a lot of times people need to look at that. What was the intent of the drafters of a law?
Thank you. And I will pass it to staff.
That is a absolute categorical yes. That is exactly what the report is for. And so members should definitely consider that there's going to be a lot of stuff that may be able to be explained in the report that not only provides intent, reasoning, rationale, but may also help explain it as well, just in terms of trying to clarify. You know, obviously the code ideally would be clear enough to implement, but it sometimes may be helpful to have that additional information.
Thank you. Co-Chair Dan.
So I guess what I want to do is kind of a temperature check of people and this section, because my proposal is just to read through it tonight. If you don't think we're ready to consensus on it, then we should probably move to the other stuff so we can close out the meeting by 9:10. But if you think we're ready, you know, I mean, I guess back to the facilitator's question, is there any more discussion about this or any more concerns before we go to the questions?
I can ask, is there any more questions, edits before? And I can always ask the question, and then if there is, no, that means we're not ready. Staff?
I just wanted to mention one other thing, just from a logistical perspective. In the first, so little one here, the Roman line 680, it talks about prior to a board member being seated, which presupposes that they've been appointed as a board member, but haven't yet started their role. And that's sort of chronologically the first step in it, followed by the nominating entity's role, and then the nominating entity may opt not to pass on an applicant's nomination. And so it may make sense to say prior to an applicant being nominated in the small I to retain that, just to sort of clarify when in this process that happens.
Okay, yes, Commissioner Jumi.
Yeah, kind of building on what staff said, I think just as a reminder for y'all, the way the system currently works, at least by my recollection, it's been a couple of years, but IPR currently runs a preliminary background check on you before you are formally nominated to city council, when you're a candidate. And then before you can start hearing PRB cases and get your full CGIS access, you have to do a separate background check through the Bureau and Oregon State Police. So it seems like in this process, we're contemplating, I guess, not trying to knock out both. But that may be why there's some confusion here around those two background checks. I don't know what one IPR runs, but I think it's more of a kind of an employment credit, check kind of thing, as opposed to the Oregon State one, which I assume is a little bit more thorough.
Thank you, Commissioner Jumi. Co-Chair Dan.
All right. Well, I'm gonna suggest the language proposed by staff, because they can't propose it, and let the facilitator ask the question. And if there are still concerns, then I think we should put this off to the next meeting.
Okay.
So we can just get done with this.
That sounds good, Co-Chair Dan. Okay. Staff.
Yeah. So just to clarify to Commissioner Yume's, what's in code, I can't speak to what is actually happening nearly as well as you, given your experience. But what's in code does also say that it's under selection criteria, and it has to, it's right before the neutral and biased text that they have. And so about the selection committee, so it's also temporally at the same time frame as what you are considering here. So it does align with existing city code in that way. Yeah, and then to facilitator Victoria, this may make sense to sort of just note that is provisional approval, pending legal review as well. But you can ask the questions.
Thank you. Yeah, like anything else that we have approved, but thank you for letting me know. Okay, is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the new proposed changes? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed changes? Okay. Thank you. I believe this is the last item. We're gonna review the document. Commission Co-Chair Shirley, were you abstaining against it or would you approve? I just wanna know because it's okay. We just need to know.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. I don't like it, but I don't have to like everything. Otherwise, we'd be here forever.
Okay, thank you. Staff.
Yeah, so this is sort of why, just to clarify a process note, why there is a question of can we move on is to allow for another change that may need to happen to this section. So, without necessarily opposing, which nobody did, the addition of this entire section, you still could say we're not quite ready to move on if you'd like to deal with this particular phrase. And I think it also appears up here. If there's a particular term, and I see that there's a proposal in the chat from Commissioner Simov as well, so I'm happy to put that on screen.
Yes, there is a proposal.
Yeah, I just sub ability for capability can cover probably a more acute spectrum of without inferring on someone's inability to do something, but the expectancy of the job.
Thank you, Co-Chair Sima. And again, as staff say, even if you approve it, we're not gonna move on. That way we can continue if you think another suggestions. Is there any additional suggestions? Co-Chair Charlie, go ahead.
It just seems like, again, they would be able to do the job physically, mentally, and all those things. But because of their record, they're not I don't think prevented, but they're prevented, it prevents them from doing the job because they can't access records, right? So it just feels like there has to be a different way that shows that, different way of wording it that shows that it's the job that part they can't do. It's not that they're not. I don't know. It just, yeah, it doesn't land right. Seems like there's a better way to word it. Because if you're not capable and if you're not able, it sounds like then you don't get the job, even though it says they'll take them into consideration.
Yes, thank you. We're gonna flag this for further discussion, but before we move on to the next item on the agenda, knowing the document, I'm gonna pass it to Commissioner Christian.
Oh, thank you. I was going to put it in the chat just now. I don't want to hold this up too much. I just thought of the word preclude as opposed to capability. So like might preclude them from doing their job because it's more of an obstruction rather than like affecting their ability to do the task at hand. They're still capable people. They just have a barrier outside of themselves.
Yes, yes.
They are very happy about your suggestion, Commissioner Christian. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna come back to this when we review again the document, but it's getting closer, right? We're gonna move to the next item in the agenda. Is that okay? Okay. The next item in the agenda is general public comment. And we will now take open public comment on the issues the PAC is discussing, or community members can also tell their story about policing and police accountability. We ask members of the public to keep their comments or questions to 3 minutes in length and raise their hand in Zoom if they like to speak. We invite now members of the public to make any comments. I don't see
anybody.
No, thank you, facilitator. Okay, then we're gonna move on the next item on the agenda. That's next steps. And the first thing on next steps is member curiosities, and I will pass it to co-chair Dan.
Okay. Well, this member curiosities is the time when you have any questions or stuff that you want to share with the rest of the commission that's not necessarily needing an answer right now, but you know, you have up to a minute and not everybody can go. We're already running pretty late, but if you have anything that you want to put on the table, now's the time to do it.
Any question, any comment? Yes, Commissioner Casey.
So the only thing that I wanted to mention is that our work was recently mentioned in both the most recent report from the U.S. Department of Justice to the court regarding sort of their the progress that the city is making on the settlement agreement, and it was also specifically called out in the report that was just released, the independent review of the uses of force during the 2020 protests, which found a number of sort of flaws in the city and the police bureau's oversight of that force. And one of their specific solutions that they called out was making sure that when there is a new entity constituted within the police bureau to oversee protests, that the new board has review and oversight authority over that. So just wanted to let everybody know that sort of as these other things are going on out there, our work is considered an important part of the sort of larger work of getting Portland policing to work.
Thank you, Commissioner Casey. Is there any other additional comments or questions? Okay, now, oh yes, Co-Chair Simap, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm very happy that Commissioner Lewis brought that up, because even the OIR report, which they will be presenting to the Portland City Council next week, it incorporates the identity of the board that we're building in their conclusions, and I left a link in the chat for you guys to peruse through yourselves. But on page 75, item number 6, it states that there's a recommendation for a new public order team that must be rigorously scrutinized by PPP executives, overseen by Portland's new oversight agency and transparency introduced to the public. So some good stuff that kind of incorporates what we're kind of building as well, and things to be familiar with.
Thank you, Co-Chair Simab, and thank you for sharing the link and the information. Thank you. Now I will pass it to staff.
Yeah, thank you. So first, there are a couple other events that are coming up that may be of interest to the public or members, so I'll just mention them here before getting into the public hearings part. First off, the quarterly report of the PAC will be presented for April to June 2023. That'll be presented next Wednesday, August 16th at 9:45 a.m. at City Council. It's the first item after communications on the agenda. Secondly, the status conference on the settlement agreement is next Monday. These happen periodically. The last one was February 28th. They sometimes happen more frequently than that. That is something being run by the U.S. court. That is the court for the U.S. Department of Justice versus City of Portland case of the settlement agreement. In that case, it's at 9 a.m. on Monday, the 14th of August. And it's in person at the courthouse downtown. And there's a way to call in, but I'm not sure if that information has come out yet to zoom in on that. And then finally, the mayor will be at the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing next Wednesday evening, August 16th. I think that meeting starts at 6 o'clock. But in between all of that, there is a public hearing of the Police Accountability Commission next Monday, August 14th at 6:30. The way this is going to work is it's a public hearing, which I'll explain in a moment, from 6:30 to 8:30, and then business following that until 9 o'clock in a sort of normal public meeting. A public hearing is effectively a large public comment and Q&A period where members of the public can give their input on the proposed code and the proposed report eventually as that comes out, all of the work of the PAC. In the event that there is a large, either many people attending or people speaking many times in whatever way that goes, it'll go until 8:30. If there's a couple, if all the questions are answered by 8:20 or something, then about from 8:20 the meeting will switch over to being a public meeting and run the rest of the way till 9 o'clock. So that's how Monday is going to work. And then there may be another. Thank you, Commissioner Dan, for posting in the chat about how to access the settlement agreement status conference hearing. The other thing that's there may be another one later on, but it'd be about the report. So this is the best opportunity to weigh in for members of the public on the draft code as it comes out. And then the other item that's worth mentioning, the sort of, I think it's the next slide, is public drafts of final PAC documents. Obviously the code public draft was posted earlier this week. That will be updated as each change is made by the members. It'll be updated showing track changes when there are proposed changes yet to be approved or decided upon. And it'll be updated as changes are made to accept those track changes and incorporate them into the text. So the track changes will not be showing at that point. And then there will be a public draft of the preliminary public draft of the report coming out as well. And the report's going to be even more complex in terms of a bunch of different sections. All of the areas of agreement will be appendices or annexes to that document. And so if you're wondering what happened to all the work that you've been doing recently on the areas of agreement in the last 2 weeks, that's still happening. It'll just be part of the report now because that's where they will eventually live, along with a whole lot of other information about the PAC, including the things that Co-Chair Dan mentioned earlier with relation to reasoning and rationale and intent, as well as some process notes on the PAC's process and how much you have all to brag about with that. Yeah, that's all going to be coming out hopefully early next week. And so it may help you as you consider the code draft to know what's going to be in the report instead. For example, things that go into the board's bylaws or that you suggest going into the board's bylaws, or things that you suggest going into the office's administrative rules adopted by Bureau would all be in there as well. And then it's also available to the public to look at before you eventually approve that. And all of that has to happen by August 31st, but is currently scheduled to happen on August 28th. So that's a lot of information, and I'll stop here. But looking forward to hearing more, and you'll get an email with more information on how to propose changes in the most efficient possible way to help make sure that this process can go and hopefully get done on time. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. Okay, as a reminder, you can submit advanced public comment to the Police Accountability Commission via web form, voicemail, or postal mail. Thank you to all the members who attended today's meeting and for your contributions today. Thank you also to the interpreters. And finally, thank you to the members of the community for attending and contributing your thoughts. If you are not already signed up for the email updates, please also sign up to receive updates from the PAC. The next meeting of the Police Accountability Commission will be a public hearing on Monday, August 14, from 6:30 to 9 p.m. The public hearing is scheduled to 8:30, and following the end of the public hearing, the PAC will do a public meeting through 9 p.m. It's now 9:19, and this meeting is adjourned.